live on a beautiful Thursday night. I'm so happy you guys have decided to join me tonight. If you're listening to the podcast after the fact and you want to see these shows live, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/road2liberty, or go like us on Facebook. Both ways you'll get all our live episodes. And if you are watching live, make sure to hit that like or subscribe button and share this show so that others can see it. We want to reach as many people as possible so we can reach them with the message of liberty. So we have a special guest tonight. She is the chair of the Los Angeles Libertarian Party. She ran for Congress in California, and now she wants to be your next chair of the National Libertarian Party. Please welcome to the show, Angela McArdle. Angela, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we've actually tried to have this show a couple times before, and each time we had technical difficulties, and we are finally getting to have this conversation. I'm so happy to have you on. So I wanted to have you on mainly because you've decided to run for chair of the National Libertarian Party, the most thankless job in America that I can think of. What has inspired you to subject yourself to such a role?
Well, I'm running because of the National Party's failure to rebuke the lockdowns. I think that it's a really important thing that needs to be done right now. I think it's actually really critical to the fight for freedom. It's very important, I believe, for the party's, ideological stance, and it really shapes the tone and the future of the party. And it's kind of embarrassing that we're not speaking up more boldly against it at the national level. And so that's why I announced so early.
Absolutely. And you're speaking music to my ears because we just finished doing a 2-part episode asking this very question, whether or not the Libertarian Party was being too soft on lockdowns. And I had Karen Ann Harlow, who's the secretary of the Libertarian Party, on, and she said, yes, absolutely, we are being too soft. And sort of as a response to that, LNC members Laura Epke and Susan Hogarth wanted to come on and respond to that. And they said that the main reason was twofold. One, that they want to let states parties take lead on the messaging on lockdown since each state's different. And number two, that they don't have a communications director right now, I guess. So they're not directing their communications as well as they could be. What do you have to say to that response?
Okay, so the National Party's job is to control national messaging. And lockdowns are a national issue because we've now got a president in who has toyed with the idea and stated that he may be, friendly to or amenable to lockdowns at a federal level. He's discussed federal mask mandates. The Libertarian Party absolutely needs to speak out against it. And people who aren't familiar with the state parties, when they Google Libertarian Party, usually the first thing that comes up is the National Party. Culture within the party flows downstream. And so, I'm not a real big top-down hierarchy person, but culture flows downstream, and we need to make sure that the people at the top are reflecting actual libertarianism, not just in a technical sort of a dogmatic way, but in a real philosophical spirit of the movement way as well. So I don't get excited about liberty or freedom when people come at me with answers like, well, actually, that should come from the states because every state. That's not what I want to hear. I want to hear unapologetic arguments for freedom. And I believe that should be happening at the national level.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of my thought pattern on all this, is that when people want to know what the Libertarian Party thinks of an issue, they go to the National Libertarian Party. And unlike the Democrats and Republicans who have elected officials who can spout out, you can figure out what those parties think by what their elected officials say, right? The Libertarian Party doesn't have a lot of that, right? So it's the National Libertarian Party and their platform that really needs to put out what the libertarian message is on stuff like this. And seeing how these COVID lockdowns are the civil rights issue of our year, of our generation right now. You know, what the post 9/11 Patriot Act, War on Terror era was a couple decades ago. That's what lockdowns are right now. And I think that the Libertarian Party really, really needs to come out and talk about that more often.
Absolutely. This is the most important thing. This is more important than the presidential election. And, maybe the National Party would hem and haw over that, but I would counter by saying, okay, so maybe Jo Jorgensen's campaign was the most important thing while she was running. You could make that argument. She's not running right now. We're not in a presidential race. So let's put lockdowns forefront. Let's put it right up in the center. And I think that it would have benefited her race a lot more if we had spoken out more boldly against the lockdowns. Because when I look at the gubernatorial races that championed it, the rainwater campaign in Indiana is a good example. He was all about defying lockdown orders and talking about how terrible they were, and his race did really well. So I think this would probably really help us too, in a purely technical, looking at the votes, looking at the supporters kind of way.
It probably would have helped her campaign too, had she been willing to talk more about the lockdowns, seeing how that is the issue that people are really concerned about right now. And I'll give credit to Spike. He was vocal about the lockdowns, and he is active in organizing protests to them. But that's one thing coming from the VP candidate. It's another thing for the presidential candidate and the national party behind them to be talking about that. So if you were chair of the LP right now, how would you fix this issue?
Well, first of all, you need to have a person who actually believes in it, right? So I believe in it. And that's one way that culture flows downstream. There's not going to be people afraid to speak out against it because, oh, what if they get in trouble by the chair? That wouldn't be happening. The chair controls a lot of who are on committees. The chair gets to appoint people to committees. A lot of the other committee positions are voted on, but the chair has a good say on that. And one of those committees is the social media committee. And I want to emphasize that social media is a small part of what the party does, but it's a very front-facing part. So for people who aren't familiar with us and they don't know all of the hard work that goes into running an organization, they just Google us, they see what's on our social media, and that's what they make a judgment about us. So I would make sure to put people who are going to put really libertarian messaging on social media and people who have a little bit more maybe wisdom and better guidance. I'd make sure that those are the kind of people who are posting on social media and they're messaging about liberty, and they're not chasing the left or chasing down the right and trying to conform to toxic culture. We need to be our own culture. We need to be counterculture. That's what the Libertarian Party should do.
Yeah, and it especially frustrates me seeing some posts that are clearly aimed at getting the left on our side. It's like these people aren't going to ever come on our side because regardless of how good we are on the issues, we're not progressives. That's not what we are. We're not into that woke nonsense. And if you're not into that woke nonsense, to a leftist, you're a fascist. And I don't think any amount of trying to bring them in our side is going to be all that effective. I mean, maybe to some, but overall, you're right. We do need to be our own thing. So yeah, you decided to run because of the lack of messaging on the COVID lockdowns. The present chair is Joe Bishop Henchman. He's only been in for a little while. Is there anything that he's doing right now that you think that you'd be able to do better besides just the social media messaging?
Sure. Well, I'll preface it by saying I think he's a perfectly nice person and I don't have anything against him on a personal level. And he's always been pleasant and polite to me. I believe that our budget could be balanced a little bit better. I don't believe that our fundraising is going very well. I believe that it's up a little bit. But when you look at the metrics of it from the last few months of reports, we could see, for example, that we spend about $21,000 a year on a newsletter. It's a newsprint newsletter. Have you ever received a copy of that?
I've received a few, and I think I may have read one page out of the many different copies I've received.
So that's just a couple of things. We've spent $21,000 roughly on that, and it only goes to members. So we basically pay to read an actual newsprint newspaper about things that we've already discussed with each other on social media or read that are happening on the website lp.org. So I don't think that's a good way to spend money. I believe that there are some other things that we could do to save money and to get more money into the party. Focusing more on membership and membership renewals would be a huge help. That's low hanging fruit, right? Just getting people to renew their memberships, because that's $25 a pop. And if you send out a text message blast, emails, it looks like most of the online fundraising we do actually works, believe it or not. So increasing that would probably be a great idea. Maybe getting an office, a physical location in the center of the country or somewhere that's more affordable, where the affiliates and the National Party can use it for events and fundraising. That would probably be a really cool thing to do. I think there's a lot of things that can be done. Another thing I talk about is structure. There is no organizational chart or structure right now. That was pretty shocking to me. I heard that they are going to work on it. So I appreciate that. And you got to give credit where credit's due. But I imagine that in 2 years, that's still going to need some work, especially since they just gutted the membership director position. And that's going to be probably in a little bit of chaos. I know that Jess Mears, the former membership director, had a lot of really great ideas, and I don't believe any of them were implemented. So that's just a few things off the top of my head.
Yeah, these kind of organizations can get pretty bureaucratic in times, and when you're dealing with a lot of volunteers, I mean, just talking from my experience trying to run on the county level, it can be a hassle doing that when you're just dealing with volunteers whose commitments can come and go on a moment's notice. Speaking of which, you are actually the chair of, I believe, the largest county affiliate in the LP. I could be wrong about that, but if not the largest, one of the largest. So you run the LA County Libertarian Party, which, to my knowledge, is larger than some states, which doesn't surprise me. Being in Nebraska, our parties aren't particularly large. So I imagine you probably have a lot more experience running a much larger organization. So tell me about your time running the LA County Party. What are some of the things you did in LA County that improved it from when you took over and you think would help you be the national chair?
Sure. So when I took over in LA County, when was that? 2018, technically. It was dead except for infighting. So nothing happened except for fighting at meetings. So I had to take over a really toxic organization. There were some really good people in it. There were some people who were absolute anathema to it and just fought every little bit of progress. And I feel like it was infected with a disease. So I had to remove some very unpopular elements, and that was very controversial. And within a few months, all of a sudden, everyone started to get along, show up to meetings, and do things. So that was a really, really positive change. We went from being kind of in the red with our activism to being a little bit above zero. And then we started to grow, which was also great because memberships weren't getting renewed. We had, I think, close to like an 80% turnover rate. We would get new members, they'd be there for a year, and then that was it. So we started to see people stick around. We started to see new people stick around. And then we started to get in the news with our activism. So that was really fantastic, with the lockdown protests and things of that nature. And then we started to get outreach from other local organizations and started to have a presence. Like we've been able to speak at schools, something called the Junior State Association. And now we are right on the cusp of having, for the moment, they're going to be volunteer positions, but we're going to aim to make them paid positions in the future, part-time, membership director, lobbying, things of that nature, like a real organizational structure, which should be the case, right? Because there's 11 million people in LA County. So we should be having at least part-time paid positions with staff and treating this like a very real organization instead of just a barely strung together grassroots volunteer effort.
I
I love
think
volunteers, right? But but we've got serious
11
problems.
million people. I don't think there's that many people in the entire state of Nebraska. Could be wrong about that, but we're not that big a state. So how large is the LA County LP?
We've got right around 235 dues paying members right now. We have, I would say, maybe 30 really active members who come to meetings and do activism and that I'm in touch with at least once a week. And then we have a whole host of people who attend meetups and do things socially on top of that. And we do have meetups still. We have in-person meetups, even though we're locked down. We've just found ways around it. And we have plenty of online meetings too.
Well, those lockdowns only matter if you let them matter.
Right.
So, I mean, if people want to get together and hush, hush, wink, wink, avoid these lockdown measures, it's very doable. I mean, and
Right.
I feel very lucky living in a state where the harshest lockdown measures were a mask mandate in Omaha itself. And that's about it. There's no other lockdowns here. So we haven't really had it as bad as you guys have had it over in California, which I can only imagine dealing with all the nonsense that Governor Newsom has put you through, especially since he doesn't feel the need to abide by his own orders.
Oh, it's crazy. Everything is shut down. Outdoor dining is closed too. There are a handful of restaurants that I know of that have been defying them, and I'm doing pro bono legal work for them. And we're having LP meetups there because we want to support them, right? And like we want to encourage other people to defy the lockdowns, but they can't do that if they don't know that there's community support. So the LP has played a really good role in that. But you're right. Like it's been a I was really shocked at how quickly people acquiesced to severe authoritarian control. Stay home, do not go outside, do not go grocery shopping unless it's necessary, wear a mask when you're outside by yourself. Really bizarre, intense, aggressive orders. And a lot of the progressive population in Los Angeles just they're so gripped by fear, they'll comply with anything you tell them.
Yeah, it's so bizarre, especially because I'm looking at it from a distance, right? Here, you see people are wearing masks everywhere, but there's not any sort of hysteria about it, right? It's just like, oh yeah, I'll wear a mask. Oh well, whatever. I'm still gonna go to the store. There's usually everything is essentially open. I mean, movie theaters would be open right now if they had enough business and if there were actual movies coming out for them. That's us here, but we're out in flyover territory. Like you're talking about, 30 active, see them every week members in the LP. That sounds absolutely fantastic to me because, for those of you listening who don't know this, having that many people who are active members of your party, that's such a valuable thing. I would take, active volunteers over funds any day because active volunteers are the ones that make everything happen. They're the ones that sit at booths. They're the ones that wave signs on the side of the road. They're the ones that walk in parades for you. And having and visibility like that, can't put a price tag on it. It's just so fantastic to have active members close to you, encouraging you, and not burning yourselves out doing everything by yourself.
Right. And I think a big part of our success in LA County is that we make things fun. So I think it's really important for your volunteers and your members to like you. If you are really aggressive, authoritarian with them, or if you're just very boring and dry and you don't make things fun, you're not going to see people want to come back and get involved because they're just going to say, well, what's the point? That person was rude to me or it was really dull and I don't see any future for the LP. So I try to make things as fun as possible. I try to have a lot of social events. We had a kind of a hybrid LA, Orange County, Mises Caucus event Monday night at one of the restaurants that was open. I had to push people to go to Orange County so that we would have enough room, but people drove in from LA. People drove up from San Diego too. And I didn't push a lot of business. I gave a couple short updates and it was just a really great experience. And because of that, people are like, I want to get involved. I want to get active. I have these skills. Like, tell me what to do. So that's how I like to do things.
Yeah, and people need something to do. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. Like every year for us, we do the local county fair, and there's a lot of planning that goes into it, a lot of, getting things together. But it's a really fun event to do. And, a lot of times, uh, if you don't have stuff for volunteers to do, there's no reason for them to stick around. There's no reason for them to come to your local events. Essentially, it just becomes a social get together at that point. And, that social get togethers are good and all. But if you're not actually getting out there into the community doing stuff, there's really not even a point to existing at all except to hang out with other libertarians.
Right. You need a good mix of both. It needs to be a pleasant, fun atmosphere, but people are purpose driven and they want to feel like you need them and like they're accomplishing something and that you're all working towards a goal together. Having people show up to a protest is a really good introductory thing if you're not sure what to do, because there's definitely something you can do, right? And it's show up with a sign. And like it's a tremendous accomplishment to get on the news or something like that. But to even just stand outside in a group where there's a handful of you, like, okay, fine, we got something done, we took photos, and we're showing like solidarity. That's what I generally start with. I start with like a demonstration if people need some sort of activism roadmap.
Yeah, and those can be fun too, right? I remember 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton came to Omaha, and it was such a blast to get the local LP out there standing on the side of the road as her motorcade came driving by, waving up Gary Johnson signs. While it was funny because we were there and the Green Party was there too, and they were next to her. So they're like, "You hate Hillary Clinton too?" Yeah, fuck Hillary. We don't like that bitch. They were like, "Yes, working together. Nobody
Yeah.
likes Hillary."
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to go to these things with other like-minded people, especially if you got just one or two people with high energy. It's really infectious. It feels pretty great.
All right, so let's talk about your association with the Mises Caucus. A lot of people object to the Mises Caucus because they hear a lot of language about taking over. We're going to take over the party. And they think, oh shit, I'm in the party. They're going to take it over. I'm not going to have a place here anymore. But that's not really what the Mises Caucus is all about. So why don't you talk a little bit about what the caucus is about and your affiliation with it?
Sure. So when it comes to takeover language, and some of the people within the caucus are a little bit divided about that. The idea of takeover is about taking over the message and the direction. It's not about kicking anyone out. I think of it more like a take back. When I look back at what David Nolan and the other founders of the party wanted to achieve, and they wanted it to be its own thing, right? They didn't want the party to be chasing the culture of the left or the right, begging people to like us. They wanted it to be about unapologetic libertarianism. And that's what the Mises Caucus wants. I think that we actually have a lot in common with the ideas of the radical caucus, that we are pretty radical libertarians. Maybe we're just a little bit more suit and tie to the average person who's looking at us.
More suits, less pink hair. Not that there's anything wrong with pink hair. Don't come at me, Karen Ann, because
Right.
yeah, but yeah, I do like that look better personally. Not that there's anything wrong with pink hair.
Yeah, I think maybe, we're like the professional looking radical caucus. I'm sure that I'm going to get several people saying, "Oh no, that's not me. I'm in the Mises Caucus and I have green hair and I have this, and I'm a radical caucus and I wear a suit." Well, I know I'm not talking about every individual person. I'm just talking about what people might, see when they glance at us in a snapshot. But I think really, the Mises Caucus wants to have also more of a focus on economics. And I think that that's really important for us at the national level. It's important. It's certainly important in California because people are economically illiterate, especially progressives, and their votes reflect that, right? And it's not good for us. It's not good for the country. It's not good for our incomes. Our taxes are going through the roof. So that's another thing that the Mises Caucus focuses on. And I think that that would be really good for the party. I'd also say that within the caucus, we have a really good culture. We don't have a lot of fights internally. We respect each other. We have really good vibes. Our last Mises Caucus meetup had 21 people at it, and there was no arguing or infighting. Like, it was a really positive experience. We encourage each other, and we're all working really hard in California and dedicated to activism. So those are the sort of values that I think the Mises Caucus brings. It's unfortunate that people look at us and think, "Oh, you guys are the villains. You want to kick everyone out of the party." Like, no, we don't. Like, we want you to come into the party. For people who are on the fringes or they're unsure or they don't like the messaging, like, I want to welcome you back into the fold, and I want to tell you, like, hang in there, because we want to improve things and we want to do that with everyone in the party.
Absolutely, that's what I want to hear. Okay, so we're running up on a half hour. How it's a good way for people to get in touch with you, to learn more about your campaign, or get involved if they want to?
Sure. So you can visit my website. It's angelamcardle.com. I do have a website dedicated to my chair race that'll be linked to that soon. And I think it's Angela McArdle for lncchair.com. So that'll be up soon. You can follow me on Twitter. It's Angela for Congress, like the number four. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram as well, Angela for Congress. And LA County LP has a Telegram channel if you're curious to see what kind of activism we do in LA County. And that's LA County Libertarians.
All right, Angela, thank you so much for coming on the program. Glad we were finally able to do this episode, and good luck on your campaign.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Remember, everybody, the website is roads2liberty.com. If you want to get any Roads to Liberty merchandise, we have shirts, we have mugs, we have everything that you might want to get on there right now and help the channel out a little bit by buying some of our merchandise. And remember, we're on social media, on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, YouTube, and MeWe. So look us up, help us out, help this program grow. Angela, once again, thank you so much, and good night, everyone.